Imagine this. You're walking down an empty road. Suddenly, the road splits into two paths. One goes left, the other goes right. You stop for a moment, think, and choose the path on the right. In that moment, you're completely certain, that was my decision. But what if I told you that by the time you felt like you had made that choice, your brain had already made it, and you simply became aware of it a fraction of a second later? Then let me ask you something. Are you really in control of your life, or are you just the narrator of a story your brain has already written? This question has challenged philosophers, scientists, and psychologists for more than 2,000 years. And today, neuroscience, philosophy, and modern psychology are slowly coming together to answer it. The problem is, you probably won't like the answer, because if it's true, it changes everything you believe about yourself. Every morning, your alarm goes off. You decide what to wear, what to eat, who to talk to, who to ignore, who to forgive, who to love, who to hate. Throughout the day, you make hundreds of decisions, and every single time, it feels like you made them. But have you ever stopped and asked yourself one simple question? Who decides which thought appears in your mind before you even notice it? Let's try a quick experiment. For the next 10 seconds, don't think about an elephant. Whatever you do, don't picture its trunk. Don't picture its giant ears. Don't picture its massive body. Don't think about an elephant. What happened? It showed up anyway, didn't it? You didn't invite it. You didn't want to think about it. Yet somehow it appeared inside your mind. Now ask yourself something else. If you can't even choose your very next thought, how can you be completely in control of your own mind? This is where the debate about free will begins, and it's also where our biggest illusion begins. Thousands of years ago, long before brain scanners, long before neuroscience, long before psychology became a science, some philosophers made a strange claim. Maybe human beings aren't as free as they believe they are. At the time, most people ignored the idea because freedom doesn't just feel real, it feels obvious. And it's incredibly difficult to question something you experience every single day. But eventually, science decided to test it. Not with opinions, not with philosophy, with experiments. And that's when the story took a dramatic turn. In 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet designed one of the most famous experiments in the history of consciousness research. The task was surprisingly simple. He asked volunteers to do just one thing. Whenever you feel like it, move your finger. No difficult decisions, no pressure, no right or wrong answers. Just move your finger whenever you want it. But while they were waiting, something else was happening. Electrodes attached to their heads were recording every tiny electrical signal inside their brains. Libet wanted to answer one question, a question so simple that it could change the way we think about human freedom forever. Who decides first, you or your brain? If that experiment sounds convincing, you might think the debate is over. Maybe free will really is an illusion. But this is exactly where the story becomes far more complicated, because the experiment that shocked the world also became one of the most debated experiments in modern science. The experiment was known as the Libet experiment. Benjamin Libet wasn't trying to destroy free will. He was trying to understand it. His question was simple. At what exact moment do we decide to act? To find out, his volunteers sat in front of a rapidly moving clock. They watched the hands spin round again and again, while electrodes recorded every electrical signal inside their brains. The instructions never changed. Whenever you feel the urge, move your finger. Nothing more. No complicated choices, no difficult questions. Just move your finger whenever you want. At first, everything looked completely normal. People believed they chose the exact moment. They even reported the precise instant they felt the decision appear in their minds. But when Libet compared that moment with the brain recordings, he found something unexpected. A tiny burst of brain activity had already begun before the person became consciously aware of making the decision. Scientists called this signal the readiness potential. On average, it appeared around 550 milliseconds before the movement itself, but the conscious feeling of "I'm deciding now" appeared only about 200 milliseconds before the movement. In other words, your brain seemed to begin preparing the action hundreds of milliseconds before you believed you had made the choice. For many people, that sounded terrifying because it suggested something extraordinary. Maybe consciousness doesn't start decisions. Maybe it simply discovers them after they've already begun. It was almost as if your brain quietly pressed the first domino, and only afterward your conscious mind walked into the room claiming, "That was my idea." Newspapers loved it. Books were written about it. Some scientists even declared free will was dead. But science almost never ends with one experiment, because almost immediately, other researchers started asking difficult questions. Was moving a finger really the same thing as choosing a career, falling in love, saving someone's life, or risking your own? Probably not. Critics argued that Libet measured a tiny, meaningless movement, not the complex decisions that actually shape human lives. Then another question appeared. What if the readiness potential wasn't the brain making a decision, but simply the brain getting ready for the possibility of one? That changes everything, because preparation is not the same thing as commitment. Imagine standing at the edge of a swimming pool. You bend your knees. Your muscles tighten. Your body prepares to jump. But you can still stop. Preparation doesn't guarantee action. Some neuroscientists believe the brain may work in exactly the same way. It prepares multiple possibilities before consciousness accepts one or rejects it. And then philosophers entered the debate. They asked a question that neuroscience couldn't answer. If your brain is part of you, why are you treating it like it's someone else? When you say, "my brain decided," who exactly is the "my" in that sentence? Where does your brain end and where do you begin? Suddenly, the discussion was no longer about brain scans or electrical signals. It became something much bigger. It became a question about identity itself. Who are you? So, after more than 40 years of research, where does that leave us? Did Benjamin Libet prove that free will doesn't exist? Not exactly. And that's where this story becomes even more fascinating, because science never reached a final answer. Instead, it uncovered an even bigger question. If your brain isn't making every decision, then who is? Let's step away from the laboratory for a moment. Think about the biggest decision you've ever made. Choosing your career, ending a relationship, moving to another city, forgiving someone, or maybe simply clicking on this video. Now ask yourself, where did that decision come from? Did you create it, or did it simply appear? If you follow every decision back, you'll find something interesting. Your parents influenced you. Your childhood shaped you. Your education changed you. Your friends affected you. Your culture, your language, your memories, your fears, your dreams, even your genes quietly shaped the person you are today. Long before you ever made your first conscious choice, the world was already making choices that were shaping you. So when you say, "I decided," how much of that decision actually belongs to you? More than 300 years ago, a philosopher named Baruch Spinoza asked the same question. He wrote, "People believe they are free because they are aware of their actions, but unaware of the causes that determine those actions." Think about what that means. You know what you did, but you rarely know why you wanted to do it. It's like watching the final 5 minutes of a movie and believing you understand the entire story. But not everyone agreed. Immanuel Kant believed that if human beings had no freedom at all, then morality itself would collapse. Because if every action was already determined, how can anyone be responsible for anything? If a criminal had no choice, why punish them? If a hero had no choice, why admire them? Suddenly, free will wasn't just a philosophical puzzle anymore. It became the foundation of justice, responsibility, morality, and civilization itself. Then, modern psychology added another piece to the puzzle. Researchers discovered that much of what we do every day happens automatically. You wake up, reach for your phone, brush your teeth, take the same road to work, react the same way during arguments, repeat the same habits over and over again. Not because you consciously choose them every time, but because your brain wants to save energy. Habits are efficient. They allow your brain to run on autopilot, which raises another uncomfortable question. How much of your life are you actually living? And how much is simply habit repeating itself? Maybe this is why philosophy still matters today, not because it magically proves free will, and not because it completely destroys it, but because philosophy forces you to stop, to question, to notice, to become aware of the invisible patterns that quietly control your life. Maybe freedom isn't the ability to choose your very first thought. Maybe freedom begins with what you do after that thought appears. You may not choose the first emotion, the first impulse, or the first fear, but perhaps you can still choose whether to follow it or let it go. Maybe free will isn't something you're born with. Maybe it's something you build, one conscious decision at a time. So let's return to the very first question. When you chose the road on the right, was it really your decision? Or was it the final result of millions of invisible causes stretching back through your memories, your experiences, your biology, and your entire life? The truth is, we still don't know. Science hasn't solved it. Philosophy hasn't solved it. And maybe that's exactly why this question has survived for more than 2,000 years. Because every time we think we've reached the answer, another question quietly takes its place. Maybe the greatest purpose of philosophy was never to give us certainty. Maybe it was to teach us how to live with uncertainty. So the next time you make a decision, pause for just a second and ask yourself, did I choose this, or did my mind choose it for me? Because that single question might change the way you see yourself for the rest of your life. And perhaps that's the real truth about free will. If this question changed the way you see yourself, subscribe to Modern Philosophy, because in the next episode, we'll question something even more fundamental. What if reality isn't what you think it is? I'm Siddharth Singh. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep questioning.